Check, check. Good afternoon, north of 44 degrees. Another beautiful Michigan day here. We should take a minute and talk about generator sizing because middle of next week, we're going to have a 10 kW generator and an automatic transfer switch installed at the barn that will cover both the barn and the house. My get out of jail free card on this. This is not a master class on generator sizing. This should be considered more of two people at a pub talking about generator sizing. I am not an electrical engineer. I did, however, spend about 3/4 of a decade selling portable industrial power and sizing many generator projects. So I do have a little bit of a background in this. If all goes well, towards the end of this video, I'll even talk about hybrid energy systems. And that is marrying up generators, utility, batteries, and solar panels. I've got a little bit of a background in that too. So let's get inside and we will go through terms and how the grid is configured and a whole bunch of other things. Hopefully you enjoy this. Let's start with some terms you may hear when you start going down the path of a backup generator for the house. kW, or kilowatts, is 1,000 watts. It's a unit of power. An easy way to think of this is kind of the flow of water. Kilowatt hours is more of a volume measurement that you may hear, far more important in the stored energy world. Starting kW is the power it takes to start a device or a motor, and running kW is the power required to keep that device or motor turning. If you've ever tried pushing a car that has run out of gas, you know that it takes a lot more effort to get it moving than it does to keep it moving. Next, let's look at the overall system. You have the power company that makes or collects electricity, and this is usually referred to as the grid. You have the poles and the wires, and those are used in the transmission of that electricity. And then you have your house, which consumes the electricity. Extremely simplified, but those are the three main things. What I'm going to be doing is adding a generator that will make electricity when there's a temporary disruption of that power. Switching between the grid and my backup generator will take place at what's called the transfer switch. Transfer switches come in two basic flavors. You have a manual transfer switch and an automatic transfer switch. Just like the name suggests, the manual transfer switch requires that you switch from grid to generator manually. The automatic transfer switch monitors the grid, and when the power goes out or even starts to fluctuate, the transfer will call for the generator to start and then take over for the grid and power the house off the generator. This will continue until reliable power is restored. You might be asking yourself, why? Why do we need a switch to go back and forth? The generator, when it's making power, will send power to wherever there's wire. So if you don't have a switch disconnecting the generator from the grid, the generator will actually backfeed power onto the grid. And this can be very dangerous for the repair crews. The generator itself is pretty straightforward. It's an engine, turns the generator end, and it turns the generator end at 1800 RPMs. This is what gives us our 60 Hertz. Now that we have my get out of jail free card, some terms, the overall system configuration, and the couple components that I'm going to add, let's start talking about sizing. Most generator manufacturers will tell you that the recommended load for a generator is at least 30, but not more than 80 or 90% of the rated load. I asked my power company for a usage report to be used specifically for sizing a backup generator, and this is the report I got. The most important info is peak demand. That is the most kW that has been recorded at a single moment. Mine happens to be 7.8 kW. Using Kentucky windage, I estimated that my average use is around 3 or 4 kW. This is going to vary a lot based on time of year and what's going on in the house. The other thing to understand is that you may not always be able to rely on your generator salesman to sell you the correct generator. You need to take a few minutes and get acquainted with this sizing process. One of the sales guys that I talked to tried to sell me a 14 kW generator because the engine had hydraulic push rods, which means the engine would take a little bit less maintenance, but it also meant that the generator would be severely oversized. With a 7.8 peak load, average use of 3 or 4, that generator is hardly going to be working at all. So the question you're probably asking yourself is, why does it make a difference? Why does the load make a difference? Isn't bigger always better? And the short answer is it used to be, but not so much now. This is due largely to the changes in the engines that have had to been made due to meet the emission standards. If you have too small of a generator, you can overload the generator and literally shut the engine down. Too small of a generator is always the easiest to rectify. You can reduce the load going to the generator and you're back in business. In real terms, that may mean you can't do laundry, run the dishwasher, dry your hair, and have the hot water heater all going at the same time. That may be too much of a load depending on the size of your generator. Too big of a generator presents a different problem. If there's not enough load on the engine, then the engine doesn't get hot enough, the cylinder rings don't seat properly against the cylinder walls, and you will end up with some oil blowing by, is the term that's used, or seeping past the rings and getting into the combustion chamber. Oil that is burned in the combustion chamber comes out as a gray, usually a gray or a black smoke. Engine that is not burned gets pushed out the exhaust ports and potentially damages the rest of the exhaust system. If it makes it through all of that, then what you'll get is raw oil being pushed out the exhaust stack and just making a complete mess out of your generator cabinet. This is called wet stacking because the exhaust stack is wet with raw oil. It's not a good thing. It's not good for the engine. It's not good for the engine components. Your best bet is to take the time and properly size the generator based on real live data, that usage data. And if that means living in the house for a little bit, like we have, before you order the generator, you'll be better off in the long run. Now, the counter argument to wet stacking in a standby generator is that it only runs for a short period of time and not very often over the course of a year. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but why buy a bigger generator than you need? Bigger generators cost more money. You should take that extra money, go on a vacation, put a lift kit on the truck, buy a new fishing pole. You're always best to buy the right size generator for your application. Anyway, that skims the surface on a very, very big topic. Electrical engineers spend 4 years at school and many hours on the job training learning all of this. I sold generators for 8 years and never stopped learning. I can assure you that one YouTube video is not going to be a replacement for 3 quotes and a couple conversations. If you made it this far and you want to go deeper, then let's ride the elevator down and talk about hybrid energy. That is, adding solar or wind and batteries to your system. In my opinion, you need to decide why you want to do hybrid. Most people fall into one of 3 buckets primarily. Those buckets are environmental reasons, cost reasons, or savings, and the third one would be redundancy. If you want to do hybrid for environmental reasons, then you should, in my opinion, look into how batteries and solar panels are made, their lifespan, and what happens to them at disposal. If cost or savings is your driver, it's a tough fight, in my opinion. The components are expensive, they're getting cheaper, subsidies help a lot, but those subsidies come and go with each administration. The other thing you need to look at is net metering laws in your state and with your utility. There's a lot of variance in return rate and fees associated with the overproduction of energy. Some places do it much better than others. If redundancy is your driver, this, in my opinion, is the most logical. It does provide a 3-legged stool, a belts and suspenders methodology, if you will. It does give you the best of the grid, a backup generator, and renewable sources. I'd like to do a hybrid system here, but don't know if the cost will ever justify it for me. We'll see. Ding! Ground floor. As I said in the beginning, this is not a master class. This is a chat at the pub. Feel free to light me up in the comments anyway. Next week the crew will be here installing the generator. I'll see you then.